How are we doing?
We're doing well. We're just waiting for, I believe, Counselor Blank. It looks like she's on, but no audio or video.
Okay, it says audio connection connected. Okay.
I can hear you, Counselor Blank.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Right. You need right click on the little camera next to the audio and click on start your video.
You said start my video?
Yes, you have to click on the little FaceTime camera.
Start my video.
Start my video.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay. All right, can you hear me?
Looks like everyone's on.
Okay, it's the mayor's show then.
Mayor's on.
Can I ask who is call?
I'm gonna unmute everyone so that everyone at the moment. Yes.
No, I'm here.
I don't see her.
Oh,
Me?
Counselor, you're right.
I'm on the audio, but I'm not sure I can get into the video.
This is Lisa.
Are you guys all on video?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Let me try.
I've got an iPad and an iPhone. I don't know why I can't get the video.
Did you download the app?
Let's see. I can at least listen, I guess.
Okay. Well, it's 6:36, so we should probably. Are we ready? Are we waiting on Jan, or are we?
No, I'm just audio.
Madam
Shari, you can hear me, right?
No, are we ready to go? Everybody ready?
Ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so we're gonna
Ready.
begin. Okay, so I don't have my ballot. It's at the office, so all I have is so I'm calling the meeting to order with my little hammer. This is history. Unfortunately, I would have chosen different circumstances, but this is the first ever West Hartford's virtual public meeting. Good evening and welcome to everybody. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this meeting is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B, which permits municipalities to conduct public meetings virtually during the public health emergency. Members of the town council and some town staff are participating by video conferencing platform, and members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Television, like my husband is doing now, or on West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier TV Channel 6098, or at www.whctv.org. The meeting is also being recorded for on-demand viewing, which will be available on the town website. I want to begin by reaffirming West Hartford's commitment to open government. This format is necessitated by the public health emergency, but we are committed to returning to regular order, including in-person meetings, as soon as it is safe to do so. In the meantime, I wish to assure all residents that the town will continue to conduct its business as openly and transparently as possible under these very challenging circumstances. Because of the visual format, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before we can begin. Later in the meeting, we will be voting on changes to the standing rules, which will help facilitate the efficient and open conduct of town business in the era of a pandemic. First, I ask all counselors and staff to please mute your phones when you are not speaking. If you wish up, and I apologize if I don't see it in the order that you raised your hand. If I do not call on you and the debate is ending, then please unmute your phone and let me know that I can recognize you, so I can recognize you at that point. Second, main motions will be made by me and no second is necessary. We will proceed immediately to debate. These include motions to adopt, receive, or approve business and motions to suspend the rules. Subsidiary motions will still require a second. These include motions to amend, recognize before making a subsidiary motion, but any counselor can second a motion by just unmuting their line and saying second. Third, pursuant to Executive Order 7B, all speakers must state their name and title each time they speak. And remember to do that each time. I might remind you if you don't. Fourth, because of the difficulty in tallying voice votes on a video conference, I will require that all votes, even simple. Sorry, I think I'm muted. Sorry, even adoption of the minutes will be taken by roll call. Fifth, a reminder that if any counselor has a problem with their connection, they should immediately call Jarida Reinheimer, thank you, Jarida, whose phone number you were provided with earlier. She will let me know and I will recess the meeting while the problem is being resolved. If it can't be resolved quickly, we will ask you to call into the meeting using a phone and participate via audio only. And finally, the process for virtual meetings will evolve and improve over time as we learn from experience. And I appreciate the public's patience. I appreciate everyone on the call's patience. I want to thank everyone in advance for their understanding as we get used to this new normal. This is, again, a very, very extraordinary circumstances. And with that, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. So here we go. There's my flag. So I'm going to stand up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'm virtually shaking Lee's hand. Okay. So now we will go to the roll call. Oops.
Ms. Blanks? Ms. Blanks?
Your audio, yeah.
I can't.
I see you. That's good. Okay. Mrs. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay? Ms. Fay? I didn't get Miss Fay. Is she connected?
I don't see that. Oh.
Okay, Mr. Gold? Ms. Kerrigan?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Winograd?
Here.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams?
Here.
Okay, and I'm also going to mention Town Manager Matt Hart.
Here.
Finance Director Peter Privatera.
Here.
Corporation Counsel Dallas Dodge.
Here.
Deputy Corporation Counsel Gina Verano. Amy Kraus, Acting Director of the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. Police Chief Vernon Riddick.
Here.
And Fire Chief Greg Priest.
Here.
Thank you. Dallas just asked where I am, so I just want to make sure. All right.
Madam Mayor, I was asking if Councilor Fay was on the call. I misspelled Mayor for Mary.
Okay. So she did not answer roll call. She had called in, but I don't see that same number on the list. So we're going to have to confirm with her. Maybe Gerardi, you can text her. Thank you. Okay. We will now move to number 2 on the agenda, approval of minutes. Town Council minutes for the March 10th, 2020 regular meeting of the Town Council. I move to approve, and we'll do roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay? Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 3, the motion is approved, unanimous. Number 3, consent calendar. Without objection, I would like to place items 4B and 4C on consent. These will be addressed as a part of the town manager's report. Is there any objection? Seeing and hearing no objection, I move to adopt the items on the consent calendar. A roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Here.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrun. And number 4A, from Mayor Shari G. Cantor, declaration of emergency. I'm making a motion to receive. On March 15th, a little over 3 weeks ago, the town of West Hartford declared a state of emergency after the state of Connecticut and the U.S. government did as well. We felt this was important at that moment to reinforce the seriousness of this public health crisis and allow the town manager and the town government the authority and maximum flexibility to operate and protect our public and respond to any threats. The goal is to decrease spread of this disease and to minimize the impact on our residents. And that this was very important at that time. The third aspect of this declaration is to actually register and start our FEMA sort of calculations and bucket. This is a federal emergency, and we will collect and record all of our expenses that we spend related to this COVID-19 pandemic emergency. So that for those three reasons, it was important to declare a state of emergency. So with that, if there are any questions, I can take them. All right, so I will make a motion to receive, and we will do a roll call vote. Thank you, Ms. Abreu.
Ms. Blanks,
Yes.
Ms. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff,
Yes.
Ms. Fay, Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Winograd, Mr. Winograd,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. So now we will proceed to the reports from the town manager. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I hope that you and your families are well during this very challenging time, and appreciate the opportunity to meet with you tonight in a virtual manner to discuss the town's response to this public health emergency. I have uploaded my report for you if you wish to follow along online. So I have some introductory comments I'm going to make, and then when we get to the staff reports a little bit later in the agenda, they'll be able to add on to the remarks that I make. So first of all, some weeks ago, we established a comprehensive incident command system, ICS, and we have staff teams that are dedicated to planning, operations, logistics, communications, and finance. And those teams are operating well. We're now a few weeks into the operations phase, and Chief Priest will elaborate in more detail on how the ICS works when we get to his report. Secondly, as you know, our public schools, our libraries, our senior and community centers, and most of our recreational facilities are closed to the public for an indefinite period. We are operating Town Hall in a virtual mode for the foreseeable future. And we are able to provide many of our critical services online or by old-fashioned telephone. Hopefully you saw my email last week regarding the innovative method that our building inspection division developed to conduct virtual building inspections, and that model is being replicated around the state. So that's just one example of the good work we're doing there. In addition, we've split our public works crew into two teams working an alternating schedule, and our plant and facilities staff are following a similar model. We have also closed our playgrounds, our basketball, tennis, and pickleball courts, and our high school tracks and turf fields. Rockledge and Buena Vista are closed for golf, but they do remain open for walking. Our other parks and school grounds remain open to the public, and just this past weekend, we have employed part-time staff to monitor these locations and the golf courses to enforce our social distancing rules and to prevent people from congregating. And we receive very positive feedback regarding how part-time staff are monitoring those areas. Our teachers and partners at the West Hartford Public Schools and our information technology staff have done a fabulous job to develop and implement the district's distance learning program. Both of my two kids are in it now. I'm sure many of yours are as well. The district's providing up to 5 hours of instruction per day, 4 days a week. And the district also continues to provide thousands of meals per week to students on a grab and go basis. Next, our fire department, leisure and social services, and library staff have implemented what we call a community life safety and support program. CLASP is the acronym, for residents that have particular needs. And the registry right now, it includes approximately 350 names, and it is growing. The staff are split into 3 teams, and they contact all of those individuals by phone on a regular basis to ascertain their needs and their well-being. Our food pantry is open 3 days per week at the exterior of Town Hall, and we're delivering food to several congregate housing sites around town. As I previously reported, the mayor has agreed to cancel most of our standing committee meetings through April. However, we would like to schedule an education liaison committee meeting for later this month. We'll do that in a virtual manner. We've pushed back the budget process by 30 days as authorized by the governor, and we'll plan to conduct our committee meetings and our public hearings in a virtual mode. In addition, we've established a communications team comprised of our public relations specialist, our executive assistant to the town manager, our economic development specialist, and library staff. They have a dedicated section of the town's webpage. It's dedicated to our COVID-19 response. They're generating content on a daily basis for our residents and the business community. If you have not signed up to receive those communications, I encourage you to do so. Also to follow our social media pages. I am working with our directors to prepare a weekly status report for you, for the town council. And I'm also going to plan to send you quick daily updates towards the end of the day. Additional point I wanted to make regarding the budget before I close to take questions. So we all, I think, recognize the significant impact that this crisis is having upon our nation's economy, upon the global economy, upon the state's economy. So the superintendent of schools and I are in the process of looking at options to mitigate the tax increase in the proposed budget we submitted to you just a few weeks back. So we're working to do that now. We will have more information when the budget process does continue. Another important point I wanted to note, we are looking at a shortfall in non-tax revenues for the last quarter of this fiscal year. You know, building revenues will be down, conveyance taxes, leisure fees, although those aren't related to the general fund. Building permits, if I didn't mention those. Anyhow, we're expecting a decrease in those non-tax revenues, and we need to make adjustments to the current year budget in order to accommodate that. So last week, I did implement a spending freeze for all non-discretionary spending across the organization, and directors have agreed to commit to that. And as part of that effort, we are looking at a limited and targeted layoff of some part-time town personnel. Part-time staff who are not working right now. Hopefully we will be able to bring some of them back with the start of the next fiscal year. But we are working on a plan to do that. I know it's a tough issue. It's a tough decision to make, but we do feel as though it's imperative right now to take that action given our fiscal situation. And I will keep the council informed as to the extent and magnitude of our plan. Last but certainly not least, I remain incredibly proud of our team. You know, we stood up this ICS model in very quick fashion. We moved to a virtual town hall in a very quick fashion. And really, it's because of our staff, you know, their ability to innovate, their ability to collaborate. We appreciate the support of the council and the community as we all work together to address this crisis. It's really only by working together that we're going to be able to get through it. Mayor, that completes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions councilors might have at this time.
Thank you, Matt. Anything? Thank you, Mr. Hart. Anybody have a question? I can't see everyone on the screen, so I will leave my phone open so you can text me if you have a question.
Looks like Carol has one.
Okay, Carol.
So I don't have a question, but I just have a comment for you, Matt. I just want to thank you and your entire town staff for working so hard in terms of this unprecedented crisis that we're all experiencing. I remember the last time we met for our public safety committee meeting, and it seems ever since that week, it's just been increasingly getting harder and harder for all of us in town. So I just wanted to pay that acknowledgement to not only you, but to your entire team and your entire town staff that has been working. I know you've been working very hard overtime and all the other times that's kicked in there. So I just want to send my kudos to you and the whole team.
Thank you, Counselor. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Carol. And I'm sure everybody echoes Carol's comments too. And I also am so grateful for the leadership our town shows at every level. I mean, in every department, every level. And I just am very, very impressed with how hard everybody's been working. And I appreciate it very, very much. All right. Anybody else? I was on a different view. I think it's better now that I can see, but I don't know. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thanks, Matt, for the report and all your work, just like Carol just mentioned, and the Mayor, you as well, of course. Just had a couple quick follow-up questions. I'll put it all out there in comments so we don't have to do this back and forth. But so first off, appreciate your acknowledgement of the economic issues and how we're reevaluating the budget. I think that's really important. So I was glad to hear that. But I'm unclear, are we looking at we're looking at the end of May now for the budget vote? So that's what my question is. So I imagine we'll keep working through it in some form with the committees in May before we vote at the end of May. So that's the budget piece. And then in terms of the parks, kudos in terms of having the town staff with the parks because, you know, as I communicated to you earlier today, one of the concerns I have is with the MDC talking about closing reservoirs and what happens if the reservoirs are closed and the parks are closed and might even force people to the streets. So then you're going to have people walking maybe in closer proximity than they otherwise would in the parks. And also just in terms of an emotional and physical outlet, it's important to have those open spaces. So I'm glad that you're having the town staff deal with that issue in a productive way rather than closing the whole thing down. So thanks, Matt, and that's it.
All right, I'm happy to.
Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. So in response to both of those questions, Councilor, yes, we're moving the budget process back 30 days as permitted by the governor's executive order. We will be scheduling the budget committee meetings for the council for the early part of May. And I hope to firm up the schedule this week, working with the mayor, Corporation Counsel, and others. With respect to our parks and open spaces, I'm sure the mayor can comment on this as well. That's been a difficult issue for us, and you've probably noted over time as we've continued to ratchet back and close more of those facilities. starting with the playgrounds, and then moving on to the basketball courts, tennis courts, pickleball courts, etc. It is our intent to keep the parks and the fields open for as long as possible. We're hoping that the MDC can do the same. But in order to do that, we really need the community's cooperation. And we think folks are really starting to get it. The importance of not congregating, the importance of the social distancing. That's just so critical to preventing a community spread of COVID-19. So we realize that we all need, many of us need the outlet of the great outdoors, and our families as well. So we're going to do our best to keep those areas open. Mayor, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that response.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hart. I mean, this is one of the things as a community leader, it's the last thing you want to do, but it has been so essential to close the places where people were congregating and where we saw the highest risk for the lack of physical distancing and physical contact, but we have fought hard and worked with the MDC, our Department of Public Health, and DEEP to keep to support the MDC in keeping it open. They are meeting tonight. I spoke with the chairman this afternoon. We addressed all of our commissioners and urged them that this is important mental health. It's going to be a long road, and it's really important that we all have the ability to get out, enjoy some fresh air, and be safe, and be able to spread out. I did go through both reservoirs fully last week, and the parking lot on Farmington Avenue was 2/3 full at the time, I'd say, and everybody was practicing social distancing, or physical distancing, I like to say, instead of social distancing. But they also, whoever was in your household, you were walking close to. And I think we've talked about that before. It may appear that you're with 3 people, but they're your kids and your spouse or your partner or whatever. So anyway, I just want to make sure that people know that we really are committed to keeping our public spaces open, but we're not going to do it if it endangers the whole community. So make sure that you observe physical distancing and pass that along. And we're really trying to do that in the best way we can. So I appreciate your kind comments, Mr. Williams, very much. Okay. Anybody else from Mr. Hart?
I do have a question. This is Lee Gold.
Yes, Mr. Gold.
I just want to get used to this. I just wanted to touch on the West Hartford Public Schools quickly, Matt. And I'll just kind of throw out the topic. And I want to make sure that all the students are actually getting appropriate devices, appropriate communication, and it's getting out to everybody. And maybe you can comment a little bit more about how that's happened over the course of this period of time.
Mr. Hart?
I would be happy to. I think our district's really been a leader in that regard. They have provided roughly 1,500 devices to students who need them. Our IT staff did an amazing job cleaning all those devices and distributing them to families who needed them. And the program, we periodically will get an update from the superintendent of schools. It's running relatively well. The teachers and students are in the mode now. I think it's most challenging. What's been most challenging for the district, they acknowledge this, and they're continuing to work on it, is how to provide services to special needs students. But the larger population, the program that they have developed is functioning as anticipated, which is good news. And I did mention earlier that the ICS team we meet at 9 a.m. by phone every single day. And then we have an executive committee that meets at 3:30 or 4 o'clock every day. And that includes the mayor and our superintendent of schools, chiefs, Ms. Krause, as well as Corporation Counsel. And that's, I think, attests to the partnership that we have with the district, and we have that line of communication available with the superintendent on a daily basis, sometimes more often. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Gold? You all set?
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I also, Ms. Blanks, I just want to add that in addition to actually the superintendent texted me 1,600 devices and 20,000 meals. I mean, it's just incredible, the support that we were able to mobilize and get meals and that system up and working, and it really, really has worked so well. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to follow up from Lee Gold's question to you, Town Manager Hart. What happens when a family has technical difficulty with their equipment, just as I had getting onto this call? Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, we're able to provide support remotely, either with the teacher or tech aide assigned to the classroom or through our IT staff. That's my understanding of how it works, and undoubtedly encounter some number of those issues, but I think they've addressed them successfully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Yeah, we understand they've done quite a bit of troubleshooting in the beginning, and things are moving along very, very well right now. So fingers crossed.
Beth Kerrigan, I have a quick question.
Yes, I don't see you, Beth. Where are you?
Oh, why is that?
All right. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Beth.
My video things is on. I don't know. Sorry.
Now
two things. One is I do want to do a shout out to Tom Moore because there's a lot going on out there in terms of using 3D printers to manufacture masks, and he said ours were being used for that purpose. So I was just so excited that that's happening. And secondly, I'm kind of curious, what is the town's approach when there are large groups of individuals hanging out either in the center or at the playgrounds, not on the in parks? What are we doing with respect to that? How are we handling it?
So we try to respond to complaints or inquiries that we receive in as timely a way as possible, and generally it is the police that will respond, and Chief Riddick can comment further when we get to his report a little bit later on the agenda. He's going to talk about how we patrol, what areas we patrol, what actions we take when we observe violations. And then there are other instances where the health district might be more involved, depending on the nature of the facility, where they will make the call to the establishment to talk to the manager or owner.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Kerrigan, you have anything? Is that so?
No, thank you. I do echo Carol's sentiments. I mean, the staff has been doing a phenomenal job, and everyone does feel very safe.
Thank you. In addition to I think there were 2 3D printers that they started printing shields with, I think just last week. They donated 32,000 disposable gloves, 400 disposable aprons, 300 masks, and 20 thermometers. So really making a difference. And I know other schools did that as well because I participate in the other municipal calls. So really, really important that everybody has stepped up to chip in and provide that much needed equipment. Anything else for the town manager? Okay, then we will go on to report from, I'm looking at my phone, so I don't see any text. So new text. We're going to the reports from Corporation Counsel. Before I say the reports for Corporation Counsel, we have a brand new Corporation Counsel that did not know he would be counseling us through a pandemic, and he has been incredible. I cannot tell you it's 5 a.m. till midnight, and always a step ahead. Executive orders that come out every day, and interpretations, and just navigating us through. He drives me crazy sometimes, but no, but he is truly. We are so lucky to have Dallas's leadership and expertise and commitment and love for this community right now. So with that, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the kind words. I did want to thank both you and the town manager for your leadership. As the town manager mentioned, I serve on the ICS in a group with the 2 of you, as well as the fire chief and the police chief and the acting director of health. and the superintendent, and it is a true privilege to serve with all of you. Also, our town staff, it's been an interesting transition going from council to sort of being a member of staff, even though I'm an appointed officer. But I can tell all of the counselors that you should be incredibly proud of the professional staff that you have working for this town. They have done a wonderful job, and I'm truly in awe watching all of them work. As you mentioned, this was a little bit unexpected, and I feel like I've lived an entire career in 2 weeks with everything that's happened. Almost every legal issue that comes across my desk is a novel, never before encountered legal issue because we are literally, or at least the governor is literally rewriting the laws as we go along. It's almost cliche to say at this point, but this is truly a historic and unprecedented crisis, frankly, in the history of man. And although other mayors in the past have declared states of emergency, we've never gotten to the additional step of the town manager having to exercise his powers by executive order. And he gets those powers by virtue of the town charter, and also state statute, which broadly cloak the town manager and the ability to do all things necessary to meet the emergency when there is a declared state of emergency. As the mayor mentioned, this is actually West Hartford's first ever virtual town meeting. And it's being held in accordance with Executive Order 7B, which was issued by the governor, and relaxed some of the in-person attendance requirements for public meetings. And that was done for public safety because it's frankly not safe right now to hold meetings where there might be a large group in a room or even members of the same body in a room. The governor set minimum criteria as part of that order the towns must meet. One of them is that it must be broadcast live. I think that you should all be very proud that West Hartford, as always, has endeavored to go above and beyond those minimal requirements. One thing that was important to the staff, and I know to the mayor as well, was making sure that this meeting not just be held by conference phone or broadcast online, but it's also being broadcast live on television on WHCTI to make sure that the largest audience possible is able to observe it. Going forward, the next thing that we'll need to figure out is a process for holding public hearings. Those are meetings where public participation is required. That's a little bit more complicated because we need to figure out a process to manage the public participants, which will likely involve some sort of a moderated queue. And so we're still looking at technology that is available for that. We have our IT department working on that along with Todd Dumay, who is our town planner. And the reason for that is a lot of the meetings that are coming up that will need to be public hearings are land use hearings. I know the mayor is still committed to holding 2 public hearings on the budget as required by our charter. And again, whatever process we come up with public hearings would be used for those as well. And we're trying not to rush into the process because some of you may have seen that some towns that did rush into holding meetings have, in some instances, they've had compliance issues. In other instances, they've also had some, frankly, just embarrassing mishaps that have occurred. And so we're being very methodical and careful about it, but also realize that time is of the essence. As you are aware, this is a very small office. Typically, our staff consists of an appointed part-time corporation counsel, as well as 2 full-time staff attorneys, one of whom is the deputy. And as you are aware, one of our attorneys resigned to accept another position a few days before the crisis really ramped up. And so we've been a little bit short-staffed. And I do want to just extend a special thanks to Deputy Corporation Counsel Gina Verano, who has worked incredible hours over the last few weeks and has done all of it with good humor and patience, and has served the town incredibly well. And I could not ask for a better partner to be working with on these matters right now. We have one thing that you probably have heard a lot about now is the need for continuity of operations, and giving our reduction in manpower and also the potential with the pandemic for, obviously if one of us were to get sick, we have taken steps to make sure that the town would continue to receive high quality legal services, and we have retained the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin to provide the town with backup legal services in the event that Attorney Verano or I were unable to handle matters. And we might also be referring some specialized matters to them on an as-needed basis as we go forward. One of the appeals of them is that it's really sort of one-stop shopping for a lot of legal needs that we have. In addition to that, we've also been providing legal support to the Bloomfield West Hartford Health District and working very closely with Acting Director Amy Kraus. And again, that is a fairly specialized area of law, and it's actually an area of law that not many people in Connecticut have experience with, because we've never had a sustained, an epidemic that has been sustained for this long of a period or been this widespread. But it has been a real joy to work with Amy. And again, I'm another person where I'm continuously impressed by their professionalism. And finally, one of the main functions that we've had is every day, or almost every day, the governor issues a new executive order modifying state statutes. And he has now issued 21 executive orders. I think we're on executive order 7U. And within those executive orders, he has rewritten basically well in excess of 150 general statutes. And so in reality, this has kind of become a new supplement to the general statutes that town attorneys and many other professionals across the state are learning on the fly. My office, as soon as we get those, we carefully review them to see if there's any impact on town operations. And we then forward it to relevant departments. And we are also maintaining a robust index of the subject matters that are dealt with in those. And we then discuss them on the morning meeting with directors so that they are current on everything that the governor is doing. That concludes my report, Madam Mayor, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge, and thank you, Ms. Gina Verano. She also such the commitment and the amount of work that these two have put in is just remarkable. And I could say that again about all town staff, but this legal department really has been doing so much heavy lifting. Any questions for Mr. Dodge? Again, I can't see all of you, but I'm looking for text. I can't respond to all your texts, but I'm reading your texts, just so you know. All right.
Yeah, Liam, I just wanted to say, I appreciate that. That was a really comprehensive update, Dallas, and we really appreciate you doing all this work on the fly. And as I've been saying this a lot lately, we're building the plan as we fly it, and you've been doing a good job of keeping it straight. And the same goes to Matt and the rest of the directors. So just want to thank you guys for your work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Okay. With that, we are going to get an update. And before I introduce these three that have really been, again, beyond, I am just so floored and impressed. Amy is the acting director of the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. And I have worked with Amy for a number of years as the assistant health director. And I am so grateful for the remarkable work that she does every day. And then when you have shed such a light on the importance of public health, it just becomes so clear how important those workers are and that leadership is. Again, responsive at every turn, knowledgeable, involved in every call, and guiding us in the most important ways to make the right policy decisions for our community. And I am so grateful. This has been so difficult, and really a lot of it is ahead of us. So we're thankful for what you have done and what you will continue to do. I'm going to also, so I'm going to start with Amy, and she's going to do a presentation, and then I'll talk about our next. And we can ask Amy questions and then we'll go to our fire chief and then our police chief. Thank you. Here's Amy Krause.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So currently, the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District's been monitoring this situation closely from the beginning when this outbreak began in China. Our preparedness staff have updated our existing pandemic influenza plans to reflect planning and to incorporate emerging infectious disease, which is a high impact pathogen. We've also updated our communications plans to reflect changes in our organizational structure. We've updated the district essential services. We've also developed many protocols for monitoring and movement of restrictions for travelers to the health district based on the CDC and Department of Public Health travel warnings. Originally, when this started, we were monitoring just travelers coming in from China. Now, obviously, we're monitoring residents that have tested positive for COVID-19. We've developed, excuse me, a social needs survey to assess the individual needs of social service while they're in quarantine or isolation. This would include the grocery needs, dialysis, other medical appointments, the daily care needs of the family. We have developed our emergency preparedness response specialist has developed a toolkit. We've used this for our positive cases that are reported to help identify again any potential needs that the Health District of Social Services could assist with. We've at the district also activated our internal health emergency operations center virtually. We continue to operate using the incident command structure. We've also, again, in regards to our plans, our public health emergency response plan, our all hazards plan, our pandemic response plan, our COOP plan, and then again, our distribution for personal protective equipment. If we needed to vaccinate or any other medical countermeasures become available, we'd activate, again, our mass vaccination plan. We've, again, provided latest federal, state, local guidance to our partners, the public, and our healthcare providers. We've been participating in daily briefings with town leadership. We are actively engaged in contact tracing and following positive cases and monitoring their close contacts for signs of illness. We are closely working with our area long-term care facilities, our short-term rehab, our assisted living, our independent living, and also our group homes on procedures to isolate any positive patients, prevent cross-contamination, and again, limit the potential spread to any other residents or staff. The district is using our non-public school health nurses for calls and triage of information to the public. They are also helping assist the district with calling residents that do test positive and also working with our leadership. We are working with local businesses to ensure critical businesses such as grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies remain open. And again, that everyone is following the latest guidance and requirements from the state of Connecticut. In regards to what we're doing specifically with the West Hartford Department of Public Works is we're operating soon coming, hopefully, a regional distribution site again this week, hopefully to distribute personal protective equipment to our first responders and healthcare providers. We're partnering with emergency management to run a drive-through distribution site at Sedgwick Middle School to distribute the PPE to area healthcare providers. Again, we're hoping that this comes somewhat this week, hopefully not on Friday. And again, we're going to continue to monitor our food service establishments as well to ensure that they're in compliance with any executive order and that, again, that it's specifically for takeout or pickup only. So currently our case count for West Hartford, we have 43 positive COVID tests that have been completed for a total, and again with Bloomfield has 41, so total that we are overseeing are 84 positive cases. Currently in the state there's 6,906 that was just updated recently. Our expectation along with the Department of Public Health, is that this is looking to peak towards the middle of May of 2020, and this is the first wave. There's 3 waves of this virus. Currently, we're in the first wave. The second wave is looking to come in the fall, and then the third wave again in the spring of 2021. The thought from Dr. Matt Carter at the Department of Public Health is that this virus will affect 60 to 80% of individuals in the state of Connecticut. That is for the lifespan of the virus. The first wave is going to infect about 10% of our population. So again, we are in the middle. We're only, I shouldn't say we're in the middle, we're in our first wave. And again, it's the middle of May, towards the end of May, where we are going to see an influx of cases, hospitalizations, an increase in deaths. And so our goal, again, is to keep people safe, have people stay home if they're sick, and not overwhelm our hospitals, because we want the hospitals to be available for people that need critical care. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Amy. And it's really, really important that the public and the elected officials know what's really going on and have honest, painful, difficult information, but that's accurate and timely. So that is our goal at all costs. So at all turns. So any questions for Amy? Remember, I can't see all of you. I don't know, Dorita, why I can't, but I can't. So, but I'm looking at my text.
Chris Williams has his hand up, Mayor.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams?
Sorry, I didn't hit the mute button. Amy, thanks for the report. Quick question. You may have said it, I may have missed it. Do we in Connecticut have numbers in terms of recoveries? And then, I know we're in West Hartford a little bit behind where Fairfield County was. Do we have information, if there's any, in terms of recoveries in West Hartford? And then, if not, because it's too soon, will we have access to that information moving forward? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So currently, the Department of Public Health puts out a basic COVID-19 update every evening. And so what it does is it provides us with laboratory confirmed cases, any associated deaths, patients that are currently hospitalized with COVID-19, and then again, patients that have been tested. And what's interesting to us is that it also gives us a total and then what the change is since the day before. So for instance, I had mentioned the 6,906 confirmed cases. That's an increase of 1,200 cases since yesterday. As far as Fairfield County, where it's being hit currently, there's 3,719 confirmed cases with 101 associated deaths. In Hartford County, as of, again, just this evening, we have 882 confirmed cases and 31 deaths. So that's how you get your total. As far as recovery, I don't have that information yet. There is a lot of surveillance data that is being developed. It breaks it down even to age group and to gender. For instance, now that we are seeing a high is in between, and this is for the state, but it also mirrors our data here in West Hartford, is age range from 50 to 59. Right behind age group of 40 to 49. And again, those are for confirmed COVID-19 cases. However, on the flip side, we also have the number of deaths is in the age range of 80 or higher. So, again, that we do see those charts. Breaks it down into gender, number of confirmed cases by gender. We see a higher rate of females compared to males. However, with COVID-19 associated deaths by gender, there's an increase in male deaths compared to females. But again, this is a new virus. No one's ever seen anything like this before. So it's evolving. Originally, when we were looking at symptoms, the symptoms originally were fever, cough, respiratory distress. Now, we're seeing when we interview residents as part of our follow-up, we see individuals that have not had any fever. Some people end up just having a sore throat, a cough. Some of the symptoms are mild. At the end of the virus, we do see some diarrhea associated with it. But again, the symptoms are changing with this virus.
Thank you, Amy. Mr. Williams, anything further?
I guess the only question I have is, when you go on the Johns Hopkins map, we all know so well now, they have listed recoveries, and I can't find any information in Connecticut in terms of that in the governor's reports and what have you. And I guess my question now is, do we expect to have that moving forward? In other words, the number of recoveries we'll be seeing, if that's going to be a data point that you expect.
So let me just tell you that during the press conference today, the governor did commit to having that part of the report. So if that's,
okay, great.
I don't know if Amy has anything to ask.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I'm doing a little better, looking around. Oh, Carol. Yes, Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Amy, thank you for that comprehensive report. Now, I too want to applaud you because I know that you're working overtime. You probably don't have any rest. Your family probably haven't seen you since, I don't know, last month or what have you. But I do have a question, and my question is more for the general public because there's a lot of epidemiologic terms that are being tossed around. And I know it can be confusing for me, and I work for the Department of Public Health. But when we talk about the different waves and the peaks and the hot spots, can you just elaborate a little? Especially I'm thinking about a lot of our young people who are home from colleges and schools who are getting really restless in terms of staying home and still want to go out and do some things. I think they've gotten better and understand that they can't really go to the courts, but they still want to, maybe a jog or run or walk. Sometimes they even want to go over to their friend's house, which is totally a no-no. But can you just speak to that for me, please?
Sure. So thank you for that question. So again, we are encouraging people, as difficult it is to physically, now more than ever, physically distance yourself. Again, we're not talking distance yourself from your own immediate family. What we're talking about is physically distancing yourself from your next door neighbor, or instead of going to the friend's house, doing something virtually. What we're looking at is slowing down the virus. And so studies have shown that the physical distancing, the social distancing, has shown to be effective with slowing down the virus. Again, when I talk about waves, it's an influx. So it's literally a peak as we come up and then come back down. And so when we talk about hot spots, Fairfield County is considered to be a hot spot. New York City is considered to be a hot spot. And when I say hot spot, is because that's where we're seeing a lot of cases right now. Whether it be because people are crossing over, this virus doesn't stop at our borders or our towns. So again, if we're doing a quick trip into New York, again, I wouldn't suggest that at this point. People really need to adhere to what the governor and our mayor are saying. Stay home. Please do not venture out unless it's specifically to get, medicines, groceries. Again, this is not a time. If people do not stop this, the virus is going to continue to spread. It might take longer than May. And of course, everyone's saying, oh, no, not summer. Everyone's looking forward to summer. This is very important. And this is why we're encouraging people, again, stay home if you're sick, wash your hands, and don't venture out. We don't need to do that right now. We need to slow this down. It's very important. Like flu, this will peak, and then it will start to die down a little bit. And the concern is that eventually, because people are going to see the numbers go down, they'll think it's okay. Again, that's not an okay to stop washing your hands, or if you're sick, say, I'm just going to go out real quick. Because what you're going to see again in the fall is you're going to see the numbers start to peak up again, and we're going to continue to see that rise, and that'll be going into our second wave. And then again, we'll continue through the fall and then back down again. So again, it's important that people listen to these directives that are coming out both through the governor and through the mayor. We can't stress it enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Any other questions for Amy?
Shari, it's Liam.
Ma'am.
I just have a question for you. We are also at the same time dealing with COVID. We're also entering into allergy season. As a person who suffers tremendously from allergies, what is the health district's recommendation on distinguishing those issues? Because a lot of the early signs of COVID are very similar to a sinus infection or allergy-related symptoms. Are you recommending, if you are in that, if you feel off, to go get tested? I guess that's how do we ensure that we're protecting everyone but not overrunning the local health community with unnecessary just allergy related issues?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. The first piece of that is that if you do start to feel ill, whether you think it might be a sinus infection or allergies, what we are recommending is that you contact your primary health care provider. Talk to them first. They're going to ask you what your signs, your symptoms are. When did they start? Is there anybody else in your household that are sick? At some point, again, allergies versus flu, they're going to ask you again, do you have a fever? Do you have chills? Do you have body aches? Currently, they're only testing people if you have specific symptoms. If you were to go into the emergency room right now, they are not going to test you unless they do a hospital admission. There are testing sites, drive-throughs throughout Connecticut. University of Connecticut is one. However, you do need to call and make an appointment. There are other hospitals, Hartford, St. Francis. Again, you do need a physician's note in order to get tested. And so that's why it's important to include your healthcare provider into this. If they feel that you need testing, they will write you an order for it, and you take that order with a photo ID to one of the testing sites. But again, it's important to, again, stay home. Make the first phone call should be to your healthcare provider. Obviously, if you need to dial 911 for any other medical issues, I'm not saying not to. But again, your first call, if you feel that it's allergies, is to contact your healthcare provider.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. This is Mayor Cantor. I forgot that we really have to say our names and our titles. So thank you, Councilor Sweeney. Thank you, Acting Health Director, Amy Kress. A little awkward, but we can do this. All right. Any other questions for Amy? I'm just going through the scanning. All right. Then we will now go to our fire department, our fire chief, Greg Priest. I want to also like to say we have incredibly remarkable leadership in Fire Chief Priest. He was the one who sort of lined us all up and made sure that we were doing everything that we needed to do for this emergency, and was instrumental in the whole format of the incident control setup. Very, very well, knowledgeable, but caring and creative and responsive and respectful. And I'm just so grateful that he is on our team. So with that, Mr. Priest, Chief Priest.
Well, good evening, Mayor. Thank you very much for the kind words. I'm pleased to represent the fine men and women of the West Hartford Fire Department and provide you this report tonight. I'd normally crack a joke about the spot of shining coming over the top, but this is a very serious matter, and unfortunately, we have a lot to talk about this evening. So tonight, my report is on the activities of the fire department. And it has been quite a struggle and a challenge for us because we're a crew-based organization and we are learning how to deal with social distancing and learning how to adapt to these times in front of us. So one of our predominant roles in the fire department has been to assist with the creation of the Emergency Operations Center that's been run virtually. And as Town Manager Hart alluded before, what an Emergency Operations Center is it's a way for the town to unite all of its resources to coordinate and communicate and handle complicated problems, all with the intent of preparing, responding, mitigating, and then recovering from this emergency in front of us. And a fundamental component of that is clear communication and understanding pathways and making sure that we're all organized as we are fighting this virus. So a lot of our time has been spent working with our executive policy group and our teams and our structures to make sure that all of the resources are available for all of our town leadership and staff. Just like to thank the council also for approving the position for emergency management specialist last year. It's come in quite handy, and Bob McHugh has been doing an outstanding job with us. I'd like to talk now just about some of our response preparation as a fire department, which is as soon as we were aware of this, that the reality of the threat of this pandemic was real, we transferred 2 people out of our line and immediately into administration to assist with our planning purposes. And the reason for that is we needed a better continuity of operations plan so that we were able to maintain the staffing of the fire department. And we needed to be able to monitor very rapidly evolving information and then translate that information into the guidance for the members of our fire department before COVID actually arrived here. So we had other major accomplishments in that area that had to deal with how inventorying, ordering, and securing appropriate PPE for our responders, which I'll touch on in a moment. But we had to increase the amount of communication that we were having with our staff on a daily basis just because of the changing conditions. And I'm pleased that we were able to execute a memorandum of understanding with the fire union to be able to provide some more flexibility in how we deploy our fire resources. So additional plans that were needed in the face of a pandemic that we have not faced in quite some time is our ability to handle an exposed employee at work, whether they're at home, our quarantine procedures, and our return to work protocols. I'm very, very happy to report that we've had a good labor management relationship, and one of those cooperatives was to establish a family support network, which is designed to help members and their families who may be quarantined or become ill as a result of this virus. Outside of the planning, we've made several operational adjustments, and we've redeployed some of our staff, and I'll speak about that quickly now. What we're trying to do is reduce the curve inside of our own fire department so that we can spread this out, and we're trying to reduce the contact between our employees and also between our employees and the patients. It's very important for us to reduce any sort of unnecessary contact. So we've done unusual things, which is we're increasing our use of PPE for almost every call. We've portioned off areas of our rest areas within our firehouses to keep our staff separate from each other. And we're using now a scout concept, which is reducing the amount of responders that are actually entering into a call. And the reason for doing this is we're trying to reduce the contact with the responder, but we're also trying to conserve our use of personal protective equipment. In other areas of our organization, our fire marshal's office actually moved to the town hall just prior to this happening. So they've already been socially or physically distanced from us. But they also have a rotating schedule. And as a fire chief, I never thought that I'd be working from home periodically. But in order to keep our command staff separate from each other to make sure we have continuity of our command staff, I've actually been working at home, and some other members have been sharing some homework responsibilities as well. You mentioned the class program. I think that's a very important initiative that we're working collaboratively with our town, social services and other folks inside of the town to be able to take and do outreach to our residents so that we understand who is vulnerable and how we can assist them. I am also very pleased tonight to report that, through some excellent work by Assistant Chief O'Callahan, Battalion Chief Bill Call, IAFF Local President Kevin Ingram, and numerous other stakeholders, including ERC Manager Hungerford, that we were able to actually quickly and effectively implement our redeployment of personnel, where we are moving now to a model where we have 3 light duty EMS units that are now our primary medical responders, so our fire apparatus are not moving as much. The intent of this is specifically and solely to be able to provide a high level of medical care, but to take and keep our responders away from unnecessary contact with patients, and also to take and keep those responders away from each other in case that they're infected. We are able to take and manage some of the impact of this because our 4 newly hired employees who were at the Fire Academy were actually ended their training and sent back to us. So they are actually operating right now as drivers, even though they're not fully qualified as firefighters. They are paramedics, and they're valued members of our team now, working at our staffing. I'd like to report briefly on our call volume, which is we generally were running approximately 20 to 25 calls per day on average over the last year. Our call volume is down now to somewhere around 10 to 15 calls a day. But we know in our recent statistics that the amount of calls where COVID is either suspected or has been deemed to be a positive case has increased. Assistant Director, Director Amy Kraus pointed to it before, but the symptoms of COVID are changing. So what the net effect of that has been is our responders are now being told to wear PPE on every single call, because we're concerned as this community spread widens that most people we were interacting with have the likelihood of having this. And this is causing an increased demand on our personal protective equipment. I'd like to take a quick moment just to speak about our fire risk in town, and I want to make sure that it's not lost in all of this. We are a fire department that does EMS, and I want to make sure that my opinion is out there that I do believe that our fire risk inside of the town is increased, and the reliability of our callback personnel and our mutual aid can be compromised in this situation. Due to the stay-at-home guidance, the reduction of our public activities, we consider all of our residential structures are now occupied more frequently. Our businesses are less occupied, and this can allow for the possibility of increased fire spread before detection. And with several members out of work on our either due to illness or quarantine, our callback personnel are potentially less available. And with all of our area departments experiencing the same type of work volume and illness in the situation, I'm concerned that our mutual aid, while it's still there, it may be potentially compromised. So with the high rate of EMS calls, as well with some of the COVID-related calls requiring some of our additional precautionary members and extended time to decontaminate, this impacts our availability of our own duty staff. And right now, our most important job is to make sure that we have an organized response force for both fire and medical emergencies. So it's important for us to maintain our minimum staffing, and we've developed plans to ensure that we have that. So as referenced before, we have a total of 12 staff members who are currently out of work. 10 were quarantined as a result of exposures that occurred as a result of their response to a call where somebody was deemed to be COVID positive later. 2 are out of work with family-related exposures. And the good news to that, though, is that only 2 members are symptomatic, and the one who is known symptomatic right at the moment is a result of a family exposure and not as a workers' comp. We do expect that, provided everything goes well, that approximately 8 of those members will return on or around April 13th. But as we evaluate cases where quarantine is necessary, what we've come to figure out is that our partnerships with our medical control and with the health district are incredibly important, as we're needed to look at each and every situation in great detail to understand when somebody needs to be quarantined and how best to protect the responders themselves, but then the other responders inside of the organization. As a result of the quarantines, we've looked at our operational procedures, issued new guidance where appropriate, and made sure that all of our responders are wearing the appropriate PPE. And as I close in on the end of my report, I have 5 major concerns moving forward that I think is pertinent to discuss, which is the first and foremost, I need to make sure that we have enough healthy responders able to go to our calls. And I think that we've implemented plans to do our best to make sure that that happens. I'm concerned moving forward also about our uncertain supply chain, and I appreciate, Mayor, your efforts and those of others who are publicizing the need for personal protective equipment. Right now, we have stock. My concern is our ability to restock as the wave gets, as the curve gets higher, and whether or not we're able to sustain. So I appreciate the outreach for the personal protective equipment. It will come in necessary. Next, and it's a challenge that's facing all responders, is how workers' compensation affects our department and our town, because the virus is particularly insidious, and our procedures for how we handle workers' compensation claims needs to be closely monitored to ensure that we're providing for our responders and their families appropriately. My fourth concern coming into this is that we were carrying a significant amount of vacancies moving into this pandemic, and that we were down approximately 13% of the department. As I discussed before, our 4 recruits are back from the academy and are actually not going to be finishing the academy anytime soon. So in essence, there is no more relief coming for our staffing. But as a first responder agency, we have to keep up that staffing, and we have to address the hazard that's facing us both through planning and response. So as the event progresses, our fire department personnel costs are likely to go up significantly, unavoidably, and sometimes unpredictably, depending on how the virus affects our personnel. And then lastly, we have some great folks working in this department, and I can tell you that there are so many of them that are just facing this with strength, courage, honor. They're coming into work every day knowing that they're being thrust into this. So I worry about them personally, to make sure that they are protected, that they're given the best guidance possible. But I'm also paying very close attention to how stressful of a situation it is for first responders and for our healthcare workers to face this situation. So I have faith in them to overcome. I'm proud of them. We will provide them with as many resources as we can, and I hope for their continued physical and mental well-being. And that concludes my report. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And I want to also give such a heartfelt thank you to the department and the bravery and courage and energy that they have shown and will continue to show throughout this. It's really just such a challenging place to be, and we are so grateful for all they are doing. And you are supportive and an inspiration for them. And thank you for being that strength and that light. And providing them with the support that they need to do the work to keep us all safe. I know that Mr. Winograd had a question, and then we will, anybody
Yes.
combing through, but if I miss you, just yell. Thanks.
Councilor Ben Winograd, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I really appreciated your report. As part of my day job, I represent nurses around the state, and I've been distressed, frankly, by the various levels of support they've gotten in terms of PPE. It's a pretty wide range. And as an employer, we need to do right by our first responders, not only because they're putting their lives and their families, lives on the line, but also because we need them, and we can't afford to have people go down with quarantine, affect our town. So I do have one specific question, just in terms of the PPE. We are using the N95 masks for them. Is that?
Yes, sir. So we have all of our personnel are equipped with surgical masks, which is their first, generally their means of entry into a situation to establish whether or not they believe that there's COVID there. As the hazard to them increases, we'd have N95 masks available. We try and keep the N95 masks available for those providers who are going to be in close contact or performing higher risk procedures.
And those masks, are they, are we discarding those after usage, or are they being asked to keep them?
So at this point in time, we have a sufficient stock of N95 masks that are current, that are not expired, and they're prepared for use. However, due to the supply chain issues that we're watching nationally and very closely, our members are keeping their masks, but they're not reusing them on patient after patient right now. If they're they may reuse them periodically. Don't misunderstand it. If they go in and they deal with, say, they're wearing them on box alarms, fire alarms right now, because we're encountering other members of the public and we're very cautious. They may reuse them in that situation. But if, say, for example, they're treating a known positive COVID patient, we're not expecting that they have to reuse the mask yet.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Again, and for the public, obviously, we have the drives to bring in more. Anything anybody can do to bring in those masks. Again, people are being forced to do things with the masks that are not sort of recommended. That's not what they say on the box. I think what you're doing, is appropriate at this point. But certainly, anybody who has these masks at home and the businesses that have been able to provide it, you need them. Again, thank you for everything you and the staff is doing.
Now, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your comments. And I am very appreciative of those that have provided us with equipment for all of our responders, which includes our police department as well.
Thank you, Mr. Renegard. Thank you, Mr. Chief Priest. I know Mr. Davidoff had a question, and state your name, don't forget.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for outlining the 5 concerns that you currently have with respect to the operations. And you went through enough responders to get to the calls, as well as worried about the mental health of our first responders. And I'm certain that we as a governing body will make certain that we take the necessary steps to provide those services to the best of our ability to make certain that we're able to accomplish the needs of the department and of the men and women of the West Hartford Fire Department. With that said, can you highlight where residents can drop off materials to assist in this effort? I know a release has gone out via email, but maybe those may not be on that list. And the more we can get that information out to people, I think the more helpful it could be.
Sure. Thank you for the question, sir. So right now, there's what I would consider to be 2 primary locations that are the most reliable right now, which is our police department headquarters at 95 Raymond Road has 2 buckets that are bins that are accessible from the outside 24/7, where items can be dropped off. During the weekdays as well, down at our Public Works on Brixton Street, which is where our logistics section is working out of, they are able to receive them. And we also have an area outside of fire headquarters. The most reliable, I think, at the moment is our police department, because there's a desk officer. It's 24/7. It's a good place. It's fairly well known. That's where I would suggest is probably the best location outside of Public Works.
Mr. Davidoff, are you all set?
All set.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Anybody else have questions? Chief? Not everybody is on their video, so I apologize if I'm not flipping.
Sure, it's Liam.
Yeah, Liam Sweeney.
Question.
Counselor Sweeney.
Hi, Chief. It's Liam Sweeney. I just have a couple of questions for you. One, based on the increases you're seeing across the state in regards to COVID, do you have like a timeline in regards to your supply your supply needs? I guess that's a better way for us to be able to kind of help ramp it up, or things of that nature, so we can have an idea when your kind of drop dead date is of we're going to run out of N95 masks by X.
Sure. Thank you for the question, sir. So what we're working right now is we're working off of something called the burn rate calculator, and that takes into consideration the amount of calls that we take in comparison to the amount of stock that we have. So there isn't a specific answer to your question, unfortunately, because as we receive new stock in on a daily basis and then our calls start to go in, it's hard for us to pinpoint, but we watch it on a daily basis. I would suggest that we're good for maybe a month or so is my kind of an anecdotal guess. But the more that the calls continue to go up, the more that we need to wear the mask to protect ourselves, the more likely it is that we're going to get into problems. So that's the best I can do for you, but we are working off of a federal burn rate calculator. It's something that assists us with, and firefighter paramedic Jason Urban is one of the guys who's working very hard to keep our stock up.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, and thank you, Chief. I just am going to remind you, please go through me, because in this format, it's really, any format, you should go through the chair, but in this format, it's extra hard. Ms. Blanks, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Town Councilor, sorry.
Town Councilor Carol Blanks. Thank you, Chief, for that comprehensive report. And again, I appreciate all you and your men and women are doing for the town. And I'm really hoping that you're doing some self-care for yourself as well. And I heard all of your concerns, and I certainly appreciate it, especially for our men and women as they go out and work each and every day in those long hours. So my question is around if we were to have a major alarm fire in town, say in the next couple of days or so, especially with our staff and what you just described with the number of people that are out, and then our current staff that are probably whose stress levels are pretty high. What type of plan do we have? And I'm hoping, because I believe I heard in the past that we do have relationships with our neighboring fire departments. So could you walk me through, if a situation like that were to occur, how would we address it? Thank you.
Sure, I'd be glad to, ma'am. So for those unaware, we actually had a fire at the mall the other day. So we are still continuing our firefighting efforts. We had a fire in a local business there. So the simple answer to your question, ma'am, is we are expected to have an organized response force available to handle the first and as much of the fire as we can. When we need assistance, we call our mutual aid partners, and we still have all of those relationships in place. We work very well with New Britain, with Hartford. They come to us, we go to them. But what I would say is we expect that those networks are still going to be there. We just have to watch, and we have to be careful to make sure that we have appropriate personnel coming. But more specifically, we have very smart, intelligent, and trained commanders that need to make decisions on a regular basis about whether or not they have to adjust their tactics and their strategies based on the amount of available manpower. I don't want to be, overly concerning, but if we don't have enough people to do all the jobs to do it safely, then we have to protect ourselves when there is no life at stake. We will always provide and protect. We will subject ourselves to risk to save somebody else's life, but as property comes into play, we need to reduce that risk to us.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Thank you, Chief Priest. And Mr. Dodge wants to, Councilor Dodge would like to, Councilor, oh my gosh. Corporation Counsel.
Counselor.
Counselor, right, exactly. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a point of procedure. Under Executive Order 7B, as you've noted a few times, we do need to make sure that we're saying names and titles before everybody speaks, and it needs to happen each time they speak. The way I would suggest doing that, as you said, would be to make sure the questions are directed through you as the chair, and all of the speakers should then wait for you to recognize them. And what you can do is, to make it a little bit less cumbersome, would be to have you then state the person's name and title before they speak. And again, the reason that is in Executive Order 7B is given the new format, and because titles aren't in front of people, and because some people might just be listening to this on audio, we want to make sure that the public is aware of who is speaking and when. So I would suggest using that process going forward, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. I appreciate that very much. Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Chief Priest? I don't see any raised hands. No texts. Okay. Then thank you, Chief. We will now go to Chief Friddick, and I also want to give a big a big pat on the back and my gratitude too. This is a seasoned leader who is strong and has such convictions and has helped to guide us through this with again with a lot of knowledge and a lot of strength. And I'm just so grateful that he again is in the town of West Hartford and is here to advise us and help the team, everybody be better at what they do. So with that, Chief Riddick, our police chief Riddick.
Good evening, everyone. Chief Riddick speaking. Thank you for the kind words, Madam Mayor. And actually, my first paragraph, I have to give credit to Chief Priest. Initially, as you mentioned earlier, he really spun this up with the ICS model, and it made things flow from there. And quite frankly, a lot of what the fire department put in existence, we copied and replicated. And I think that's the best form of flattery when you do that. So I'm really appreciative for his leadership regarding this and his experience. So thank him very much. I want to thank you and the town manager. The town manager also in the beginning, he spun up these meetings every day, a couple of calls. Even if you guys remember when we first started, it was 7 days a week. And we were going at it even on the weekends. And you too, Madam Mayor, your resources, your connections, Dallas, I mean, there's a bunch of people. I hate to name specific people, but there's certain people there's a cut above that made the rest of us, step up our game and really understand what was going and to assist the town. And not to give away all of our secrets, we don't always agree, but at the end of the day, one thing we were united about, no matter what, was to make sure we created a safer environment for the public of West Hartford, bar none. All of our decisions were done through that prism. So I commend all of you. And, for the town manager and for the mayor, I have a great appreciation for you to trust your directors to do their job and not to feel that you got to step in every single time, not to feel you have to take control. To me, that's the sign of true leadership, to be comfortable in your own skin, to allow your people to do your job. So I commend you. And to the town council, you should really be happy, excited, but most importantly, feel confident in your town leadership because, when situations like this, you find out who can handle it and who can't. It's just that simple. And our team, bragging on everybody here, has done a wonderful job. So thank you all, for helping us guide us through this difficult situation. Now, we in the PD have established a continuity operations plan. Again, credit to Chief Priest. We just stole his and melded it and meshed it in for the police department. We have plans in place in case our personnel go down 10%, 20%, 30%. We'll start pulling from our community relations division, our SROs, our community support unit. And then worst case scenario, if we really had to, we could pull people from our detective bureau. The most important backbone of the entire police department is patrol and our response to these calls and to make sure our community is safe. I want to thank the good Lord that so far we have not had an officer who tested positive for COVID-19. Currently, we do have 4 officers who are out on quarantine. At the height, we've had 7 officers at one time who were out on a quarantine. Some who were coming from out of the country, others who were exposed to personnel or patients out in the field. So right now we're down to 4. At the max, it was 7. Some proactive measures that was done by our training division was that each one of our vehicles are outfitted what we call a COVID-19 kit, consisting of gloves, mask, and goggles. In addition to that, each police officer has their own separate kit. And in addition, we have a backup kit for every single police officer. So that's excellent. Our officers are required at the beginning of the shift and the end of their shift to clean their vehicles and disinfect it. In addition to that, we purchased a decon equipment. So every 3 days, every one of our patrol vehicles are deconned to ensure that they're clean and not to have any residue and any type of viruses hanging around. All calls for service for our ERC, our Emergency Reporting Center, go through a COVID-19 screening process. So every time a caller comes in, we'll ask them, anybody with a temperature, anybody with chills, anybody with a cough, all these questions are asked. And if it's an emergency situation, we will still send a police officer, but still try to ascertain and to gather that information to keep our personnel safe. Speaking of our ERC, we have quarantined, for lack of a better term, them in their own little section. So no one's allowed to go in ERC except for those who are working. And if need be, for either the fire chief, the police chief, or our designees to go inside that room. We have contacted retirees who have previously worked in the ERC in case that, several of our employees become sick and they're willing to come in and to take their place in case that happens. So that's extremely important. Another protocol we stole from the fire department is every single day, our police officers' temperatures are taken at the beginning of their shift and after their shift, just to make sure that's in the appropriate range. Our roll calls have been moved to outside, so we are practicing physical distancing. We're no longer having roll calls on the inside. Our command staff meetings are all done via telephone, teleconference, or video conference. We've implemented a telephone response unit. So lower calls for service are handled by officers who are inside a police officer, again, mitigating our exposure to the public for lower level larcenies, past larcenies, past motor vehicle accidents, and the like are handled internally. Year to date, in the past 3 weeks, we've handled 80 calls for service. Overall, our calls for service compared to the same time period last year, we're down about 15%, which in a way is very, very good because it frees us up for proactive measures with all the stores being, the restaurants being closed and some of the stores being closed also. It gives us an opportunity for proactive patrols. We reassigned one of our training officers to strictly deal with COVID. He is an EMS, I think he's actually a paramedic. So that's his full-time job to be part of COVID. This past Tuesday, actually yesterday, I apologize. We also assigned another police officer who has EMS training full-time to COVID. I will echo some of the sentiments of Chief Priest. This is an effort to mitigate the exposure and the risk for our personnel, to provide them the information that they need, and anything else we can possibly think of, out of the box to help our personnel get out there each and every day. Unfortunately for us, today, for an example, there was a stolen car which we were able to get, and inside there was crack, a stolen gun, and a stolen motor vehicle. An arrest was made. Crime doesn't stop. It might mitigate to an extent, but crime doesn't stop. So equipping our personnel, making sure their vehicles are safe, and taking care of their well-being is extremely important. One other thing that's been mentioned earlier about the social distancing, physical distancing, what are we doing for crowds? What are we doing for large groups? Well, we put out our own executive order guidelines, which are written orders who are put out for our personnel. Our first response is, when we can, is verbal warnings. We want voluntary compliance. We're not turning this into a police state. We understand that some people don't understand the importance of this. So we're trying to educate the public. And the last resort will be an arrest. And that's for maybe somebody that we've asked several times. We've given verbal warnings before, but repeat offenders and those who just disregard our requests or our orders. I'm happy to say thus far, the public has been very cooperative when we show up and ask them to disperse. Quite frankly, I think sometimes we're so immersed in this, and I know this is definitely, I'm guilty of this. I forget that people aren't as intimately involved in this as we are. Even my wife would ask me certain questions. You're at work, all the time, and you guys have all these conference calls going on. I have to explain to her, just the magnitude of the situation. So I do think people are starting to get it slowly. Evident as I'm sure many of you have heard complaints about Farmington Avenue, Albany Avenue with parking and people trying to go into MDC. We have started off again with verbal warnings, but now we are enhanced our enforcement measures. We have parking signs that have been put up by DPW. We've reached out to Farmington. They also have extended no parking signs, probably a third of the road down their way into Farmington. And now we'll be forced to take more stringent measures on issuing citations. We have to get compliance. I personally drove past both reservoirs today and in several parks. Today was a good day. As the town manager and the mayor and the
I lost you.
I should be back. And as the mayor, the town manager, and the rest of us during the executive policy group, I was very concerned about this week. It was going to be 65 degrees, 62 degrees tomorrow, and the forecast for this month was supposed to be above average. You know, people are just tired to be inside the house and wanting to get out. So these measures that we're taking, and counselors, you might be getting phone calls, but you have to understand it's much easier for us to control this later if we take control now. It was the right decision that we had to do to take away the basketball courts, close the pickle courts and the tennis courts and everything else. We had to do this. It wasn't an easy choice. As the rest of the policy group knows, we talked ad nauseum and had conversations regarding this, but it was a necessary action to take. You know, we're looking at COVID in the police department through the lens of life safety, incident management, and property protection. That's why we made these decisions, to ultimately save lives in the long run. So that being said, I actually could speak for hours. You know, to break this down to one page is difficult. Our coup plan alone is 5 pages long, but I will stop now and entertain any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And I also want to thank your department, your officers, for their remarkable work, their bravery. And I also want to thank the families of all of our public safety officials and our health department too, all that are exposed and on the front line. It is it's a sacrifice of everybody, and everybody's at risk, and we need you all. So stay mentally healthy, physically healthy, and we're thinking about all the families, and we're here to support you. Are there questions for Chief Riddick? Remember, go through me. Okay. Mr. Gold's Minority Leader Gold.
Thank you very much. And Chief, again, thank you for everything that you're doing and first responders are doing. Truly appreciated. I do have a question. I just want to go back to what you touched base on in terms of maybe prioritizing the arrests and what's happening as opposed to protecting the officers out on the field. We've heard throughout the country, some areas are limiting the types of arrests and what's happening. Is that something that you're looking to do here as well, or are you going to be more business as usual with the understanding that everybody's going to try to protect themselves from COVID-19?
Yeah, approximately 3 weeks ago,
Chief, wait 1 second. Chief Riddick, sorry, you have to go through me. Chief Riddick, go ahead, please, Chief Riddick, go ahead.
Chief Riddick, responding to the commissioner's question. Yeah, about 3 weeks ago, we gave a higher degree of latitude to our supervisors to issue misdemeanor summonses instead of in custody arrests. You know, for example, maybe a larceny 6th or a larceny 5th in the past, it might be a custodial arrest. Now it will just be a summons to appear at court to mitigate the interaction with the public. So those are things we did, in advance. And then, going forward here, there's a list of charges we could utilize for people who don't adhere to the governor's executive orders. Many of these are misdemeanors or infractions. There is at least one felony there. But again, that's last resort. And again, we're trying not to bring people back to the PD unless we really have to. One exception would be, we had a case just last week where a larceny suspect kicked a police officer and then spit at another police officer in the face. We had to go through our decon protocol with that. In my opinion, that's crossing the line, and that person was held in our lockup because they did not make bond. And that's a situation that should have been done and was done.
Thank you, Chief Riddick. Mr. Gold, do you have anything further?
Do not, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Blanks, you're next. Go ahead, Carol Blanks, Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Carol Blanks. Thank you, Chief, for all that you do. Thank you for your report. And my biggest thanks go out to your men and women that's doing all this challenging work during this unprecedented times. My question to you is really around, I guess, messaging, especially as we approach the holidays that are coming up, and the warm weather and everybody being cooped up and really antsy about getting out and about. What would your message be? And not only to the residents, but also to your officers, because I heard what you just said, you're not really trying to go out and arrest anybody. It's more education. But I am mindful that the weather is warming up, as our acting director of public health said, we're peaking, it's spring, and our kids have been in the house for a very long time, along with many people who are working home remotely, and we're human, right? And I notice, although our courts are closed and our parks are still open, we still have the walking trails, and I don't see many people on that. So what could your messaging be to folks to still keep their physical distancing, but to minimize the gatherings, either inside the home or in and around outside of the home? Thank you.
Well,
Thank
actually,
you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Chief Riddick. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Chief Riddick
Yes.
speaking. We actually have a message queued up and ready to push out, again, anticipation of the warm weather. And part of that message is, one, keep the social distancing, understanding that people are being cooped up. Number two, three, this message will include a listing of the charges that people can be charged with if they do violate the law. And I gave you a couple of examples earlier: interfering with an officer, breach of peace, violation of declaration of public health emergency, a whole bunch of those charges. And just honestly, just utilizing good old fashioned common sense. That's what we need right now. We have to override emotion with common sense and intellect. The desire to get outside is a good one. The desire to get outside and congregate is not a good one. So we will do our part. But again, as you've heard me say during the public safety meetings, it's not just the PD, it's not just the town, it's a community-wide effort. We need to work together for the preservation of life.
Thank you, Chief Riddick. Anything further, Ms. Blanks?
No, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I do want to just add to that, and then Mr. Sweeney's up next. I do just want to add that we've been working with the school system because April break is coming, and we know the weather's good, and there's concern. So we're doing working on a PSA program that will, I think pretty sure the theme is West Hartford is apart so we can be together, or something. West Hartford together, West apart so we can be together, something like that. So it will be messaged by students for students to get that point across. So that's a really important initiative that was actually shared on a Bloomberg webinar, and I think it's really, really important. And we will continue that through, and we'll tag on to the police's messaging as well, and just continue to push that out. And I hope that you all do the same with your social media. Okay, Mr. Sweeney, Liam Sweeney, Town Council.
Liam Sweeney, Town Council. Chief Riddick, looked like you had something to respond to. I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Chief Riddick speaking. I forgot to mention that we actually have just started a new initiative. My administrative assistant, Sarah Pryor, had the idea. She said we weren't utilizing social media enough. So we actually put out on our Facebook page reminders for people with social distancing, physical distancing, and washing their hands. They're pretty funny, but at the same time, some levity there in the midst of a serious situation. So if you have an opportunity to check out our Facebook page, you'll see that on there.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. Mr. Sweeney, did you have anything further? Yes.
Liam Sweeney, Town Council. Chief, I just had a quick question for you in regards to, have you seen a change in any pattern in regards to the crime in town? I know that there's been some reporting about domestic violence increasing, with obviously people being forced into a home a little bit more. And if so, is there anything that the town can do to help? Obviously, there's not much that we can do in those, but as much information as possible, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman. Historically, around Thanksgiving, Christmas, the major holidays, you have an increase in domestics because of the emotion involved. A lot of times you get families together, and one other commonality is alcohol with that. We are anticipating an increase with domestics and other domestic violence type situations going forward. We're hoping that's not the case, but so far that has not been the case. And maybe with the warm weather and people getting out in their yards, that might be helpful because they're not cooped up. But that could be an unintended consequence of this COVID situation, and that could be a reality. And again, we are expecting and anticipating that, and hopefully we're wrong.
Thank you, Chief Riddick. Mr. Sweeney, are you all set? It's something I think we're really going to have to keep an eye on. I was on our Jewish Family Services call today, and there's a lot of thought and planning for this, because it's mental health is going to be a real challenge. Substance abuse is going to be a real challenge, continued challenge, I should say. Anybody else? I'm looking at my phone, so if I don't see your hand.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Chief Riddick.
Yeah, I think one part I didn't answer from Councilman Sweeney was, what can the town do? And I think maybe this is something we can talk about through an executive policy group. Maybe some messaging and anticipating stress that's going on here, and some of the signs and symptoms, just being short with each other, not really understanding that. Something that didn't aggravate you too much 2 months ago now might just set you off. And just people being cognizant of that, getting outside the house, taking a deep breath before you react and the like. So that might be something we can discuss.
Thank you, Chief. I would like that opportunity very much. I do know West Hartford Yoga is doing a mindfulness and at 8 o'clock every night. So we'll tune into them. Anything else for the Chief? Okay, with that, I will say thank you to our health director and this amazing trio, our amazing health director and our two amazing chiefs. Thank you so much for being here tonight. You don't have to continue on our new business part of our meeting. Appreciate it so much. Unless you want to, you can tune in, but feel free to go. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you,
so
Madam
much.
Mayor. And a shout out to Amy, too. I forgot to mention her earlier. She's been incredible. Thank you so much, Amy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Good night.
Have a great night.
Okay. I know that Mary was having some audio problems. I would like to check in with Mary and see if they're corrected. If not, we might need to take a short recess. Mary. Jerida, could you call her, or can we?
Hi, Mayor Cantor. I have been on the phone with her via text. I don't know if she's got her problem resolved. If you would allow me 5 minutes to give her a call and see what's going on with her.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute break and be back at 8:35. Thank you. for the immediate consideration of a resolution amending the standing rules for 2019-2021 term of the Town Council of West Hartford, and this needs a 2/3 vote. We need a roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Madam Mayor? Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Before
Mr.
thank you, Madam Mayor. Dallas Dodge, Corporation Counsel. Before the vote is taken on this, may I suggest that just given the significance of a rules change and the process by which we are changing the rules, which is a little bit irregular, that we may want to table this until later in the meeting so that Councilor Fay can participate in the vote on the rules change?
That's fine. Okay, so we will table and then take it up. We don't have to make a motion on that, so. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dodge. So we will go to item B, which is a resolution concerning the powers of the town manager during a declaration of emergency. I'll make a motion to adopt, but would Matt like to speak to that, or would Corporation Counsel like to speak to that?
Mayor, this is Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'm happy to speak to it, and Corporation Counsel can add to my comments.
Thank you, Mr.
So what you have in front of you, Council, is a proposed resolution that's designed to provide the Town Manager with certain limited powers to modify contracts, leases, and other agreements that might typically require council approval. The resolution does include some key safeguards. For one, I can only take this action with a written opinion from Corporation Counsel attesting to its legality. Secondly, I would need to promptly notify the Town Council when I've modified an agreement subject to this provision. And furthermore, the authority delegated to the Town Manager under this resolution will expire as of July 6th, 2020, or when terminated by the mayor, whichever action occurs sooner. And we're proposing this, really, it's designed to facilitate operations when it could be difficult to convene a meeting of a council in a timely way. For example, if we have a party seeking relief under an agreement that we have in place with the town, and if we think it would be prudent to provide that relief and negotiate different terms, perhaps for an interim period, we want to be able to move forward with a situation like that. So Corporation Counsel has prepared the attached resolution for your consideration. We are requesting your approval, and I will ask Attorney Dodge to elaborate on my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Dodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Corporation Counsel Dallas Dodge. I think the Town Manager summarized the resolution and the purpose of the resolution fairly well. Just to add, in terms of the safeguards, this is a temporary resolution. It expires on July 6th. So it's only a 90-day period where the Town Manager would have this power. In addition, Madam Mayor, you would have the ability to rescind the power by order, and also the Town Manager or the Town Council, because this is a resolution, can come back in at any time to remove this power if the Town Manager were to not use it appropriately. What the purpose for having this is really, it's a legal concept known as force majeure, which is, occasionally in contracts, there are circumstances, extraordinary circumstances, such as acts of God that come up where the parties can no longer comply with the precise terms of the contract. And that's the type of situation that we're envisioning where the Town Manager may want to exercise his powers under this resolution. The prime example would be leases. We have a number of leases in town where it might be difficult for the parties to comply with their responsibilities under the terms of those leases. Leases are typically approved by the Town Council, and amendments to leases are also approved by Town Council. And the Town Manager with this authority would be able to amend them in a reasonable way if it was appropriate, because the parties couldn't meet their obligation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so again, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has, but I think that the town manager summarized it well.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Any questions for either Mr. Hart or Corporation Counsel? I'm looking. I have one text, but I don't think it's related. Nope. Okay. All right. With that, we will do a roll call vote. Melissa Bro.
Okay, this is item 6B. Ms. Blanks,
Yes. Do I have to say town councilor? Yes. Town councilor Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff,
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay, Ms. Fay, Mr. Gold,
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Town Council Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bro. We will go on to C. This is a resolution.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Bell.
May I suggest, and this is a practice that is more typical with the legislature, but I think that given the unique circumstance, it may be appropriate here. I would suggest that you might want to consider leaving the votes open where Ms. Fay is not available to vote. And then at the end of the meeting, she would have the opportunity to cast her vote on the relevant resolutions.
Could she cast it through a text to me?
Oh, she's here. She's here. She's
Wait,
here.
you know what? Never mind. Technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on with
That's
this thing.
okay. But did you hear the vote on this particular resolution or do you?
Yes. And
Okay.
I did say yes. I said yes several times.
Okay. All right. Okay.
but
So,
anyway.
Counselor Mary Fay, I'm going to introduce you to say it yourself. Okay, go ahead. Your vote on the resolution.
Yes,
your
this
roll.
is Mary Fay, and my vote is yes.
Okay, thank you. All right,
you.
so, yeah, sure. So 6B is all set. Why don't we go back up to 6A, the resolution for the standing rules. This is the resolution amending the standing rules for the 2019-2021 term town council of the town of West Hartford. I move to suspend, this is just a motion to suspend the standing rules for the immediate consideration, of a resolution amending the standing rules for the 2019-2021 term of the town council of West Hartford. And this requires a 2/3 vote. Roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Ms. Blanks,
Town councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff,
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay, Ms. Fay, I can see you.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you read lips?
Mr. Gold,
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes. Got to unmute.
Mr. Sweeney,
Town Councilor Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrun, and thank you, everyone. Now I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution amending the standing rules for the 2019-2021 term of the Town Council of West Hartford. And this also requires a 2/3 vote, but I'm going to kick this to I think Corporation Counsel should start on this. I don't know if Matt has any comments, Town Manager, but we'll start with Corporation Counsel Dallas Dodge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've communicated with each councilor individually about with a memo summarizing the rules changes that were made here. Again, Governor Ned Lamont, as has been mentioned, issued Executive Order 7B, which allows for public meetings to be held remotely. And he's also issued executive orders 7C and 7I, which also moved back some budget deadlines, which require making some adjustments in our rules. So these are really just to conform the council's procedure to the new executive orders. And there's also some additional changes that will allow the council to continue to conduct its business in an efficient and open manner. And with that, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions that any councilor has on the proposed rules changes.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Are there any questions for Corporation Counsel? Okay, with that, I want to thank Corporation Counsel Dodge for, again, streamlining this process and putting us in a place where we can accomplish the work that we need to do in this way. And I think we're ahead of the curve on all of this. And I just want to thank him very much for getting this done and communicating it with each and every one of you and giving you the time to look it over. Thank you very much. All right, any other, I'm asking again for questions. Any other questions, clarifications? All right, with that, we'll do a roll call. Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks?
Counselor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Town Councilor Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Thank you, everybody. We will go now to 6C. This is a resolution to amend the fiscal year 2019-2020 general fund budget to appropriate $375,000 to purchase such goods and services as may be necessary or required to meet the public health emergency and civil preparedness emergency due to COVID-19. I make a motion to adopt. I think I will start with Mr. Hart, and then if anyone has, if Corporation Counsel has any input. Mr. Hart, to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Town Manager Matt Hart. We also have Director of Finance Peter Privatera on our call tonight, and I want to thank Peter for all his work during this crisis as well. So he can assist with questions related to this if needed. So you have in front of you, as the mayor said, a resolution seeking an appropriation of $375,000 for expenditures related to the town's response to this emergency. What are some examples? These expenditures would include things like supplies, equipment, staff time, and other items. Many of these expenditures may be reimbursable under federal and state emergency declarations, so we will properly track them so that we can submit the paperwork at the appropriate time. And the resolution is designed to give us additional operating funds to cover costs associated with our response to this event. The funding source for the appropriation would be current year tax payments that are coming in excess of what was budgeted. In terms of legal review, Corporation Counsel has reviewed and approved form and legality of the resolution. And for the reasons stated above, I'm seeking and recommending your approval of the resolution. Mayor, that completes my summary. Mr. Privatera and I are available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there any questions for either Mr. Hart or our Finance Director, Mr. Privatera? All right, I don't see any. Do I see anyone? No? Okay. All right, with that, we will do a roll call vote. Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks?
Counselor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay?
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold?
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Town Councilor Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next resolution, this is 6D, resolution to authorize property tax relief programs. I'm going to speak a little bit to this and then kick it to Corporation Counsel to explain. This was the Governor's Executive Order 7S that came out late last week. I think it was Friday. I think it was either late Thursday night or Friday night. And there was some clarifications today. But this is as you know, property taxes are statutorily governed by the state of Connecticut. And this is giving the towns actually a mandate and an option, a mandate to adopt one property tax program, deferral program. You can adopt one or the other or both. And so I'm going to actually have Corporation Counsel's office give a little more information on this. Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Deputy Corporation Counsel Gina Verano is on the line, and I'll ask her to speak in a moment because she's really the one, excuse me, who's sort of dug into this. But just a quick sort of, I guess I don't know what you would call it, a procedural note. But as you mentioned, Madam Mayor, under the Governor's executive order, he did set out two programs that towns have the option of adopting. There's no option to do nothing. So in other words, towns must adopt at least one of these, but they can also adopt both. And I know in our discussions, you had expressed the desire that the town should do everything in its power to help taxpayers at this time. And so the resolution is drafted to reflect that. When Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano speaks, just a sort of general note before she begins that we just received OPM guidance on this earlier today, and the governor's office only issued the executive order a couple days ago. And so we're still digesting some of the information that's in here and some of the guidance. And so, we're going to try and keep our answers relatively 30,000 foot level. But we are going to need some additional time to work out some of the technical aspects of this. But I would also note too that the council, this is not the only bite at the apple for the council on this. The resolution does allow the council to adopt eligibility requirements for the deferment program that are more that go beyond what the minimum is that will be set forth by OPM. And that could be done at a later date via resolution. And so, Attorney Verano, I'll open the floor to you, or Madam Mayor.
Actually, yeah. So you have to go through me, Mr. Dodge.
So that concludes my portion of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. But the other element to this is there's a deadline that municipalities need to commit to one of those programs or both of those programs by April 25th or 6th. So Ms. Verano, I'm sure can address that. Okay, now to you, Ms. Verano. This is a Deputy Corporation Counsel, Gina Verano. Hopefully.
For the municipality to participate in. One of them is the deferment program, and the other one is the low interest rate program. So let's start off with just the basics on the deferment program. First of all, the deferment program applies to the tax bills that will be due and payable on July 1st. It extends to the taxpayers the time to pay that tax bill from July 1st to October 1st without any penalty. And the deferment program applies to the real estate taxes, personal property taxes, and motor vehicle taxes. This program, however, is only available to eligible taxpayers. The guidance that we just received from OPM today, literally at 3:45 today, gives some basic guidance on what the eligibility requirements would be. For a resident, for example, if the household had suffered a reduction in income of at least 20% due to COVID-19, that resident household would be eligible for the tax deferment program. If the taxpayer was a business or nonprofit and expected revenues to decrease by at least 30% in a 3 or 4 month time period, then that business and nonprofit would be eligible for the tax deferment program. I don't know if you want to, Madam Mayor, if you want me to take any questions, or I would continue second with the low interest rate program.
Why don't you continue with the low interest rate program, and then people can go back if they have questions. Thank you.
Okay. So the low interest rate program provides relief for those taxpayers who are currently delinquent on their taxes, and for those that may become delinquent on the tax payment that's due July 1. It applies to all the taxes that I mentioned previously, which are the real estate taxes, the personal property taxes, and the motor vehicle taxes. And this program allows the municipality to reduce the interest rate that it currently charges on delinquencies from 18% to 3%. So if your taxes are delinquent now, you're eligible for this program if you make your payments by July 1st. And if you do so, then the rate of interest will be only 3% instead of the normal 18%. And for those taxes that are due on July 1, if you make that payment by October 2nd, then the rate of interest will be at 3% instead of the statutorily mandated 18%. And finally, with respect to this program, there are no eligibility requirements that are otherwise applicable to the tax deferment program. And that's all, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Attorney Verano. I also remember this is from March 10th, right, when the state declared their state of emergency. So it only applies if somebody was to not make payments January, February, those would still maintain the 18% rate. And then, so it's just from March 10th to the July 1 that the reduction would happen. I'm sure might be, well, I'm not sure, but there might be questions on this. So please let me know if you have a question. I will comb through. Yes, Mr. Gold.
Town Councilor Minority Leader Lee Gold. Gina, thank you very much for that comprehensive discussion. I do have a question though. Is there a distinction that's being made between individuals as opposed to owners of apartment buildings in town as to what program you're eligible for, or could you be eligible for either or?
You can be eligible for, Gina Verano, Deputy Corporation Counsel, Madam Mayor. You can be eligible as a landlord for both programs.
You beat me, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There are some additional requirements, however, with respect to the deferral program on landlords. And without getting, too much into the weeds, let's just say that in order to qualify for the deferral program as a landlord, you also have to provide some relief to your lessees and tenants.
Mr. Gold, do you have any further questions, Lee Gold, Town Councilor?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Attorney Verano. Any other questions?
Mayor, this is Matt Hart, Town Manager.
Go ahead, Mr. Hart, Town Manager.
Sorry, I understand my connection is a little bit faint, but I think it would be helpful to have Mr. Privatera talk a little bit about the rough estimates we've calculated regarding the financial impact of these proposals and how we would seek to manage those.
Okay, Mr. Privatera.
Good evening, Pete Privatera, Finance Director. We looked at both programs and a couple of financial impacts. Number one is on the deferment program, we'd probably lose some interest income this year. We estimate about $131,000 that we would collect if that's deferred. And on the low interest rate program, we're looking at roughly $200,000 that we would lose because of the lower interest rate. My primary concern is the cash flow impact of this. If we estimated that based on the current year, we collected $140 million in the first quarter of taxes, and we made some rough estimates on who would be eligible for the deferred program as well as what the impact would be on a low interest rate program. And I'm not aware of the recent OPM guidelines, but we assume that 90% of the commercial properties, 95% personal property, and then 30% of residential and 30% of motor vehicle would probably qualify for this. And we made some assumptions on the grand list, and basically, if our assumptions were correct, then of the $140 million, we'd collect roughly $79 million. It would be tight. I'd have to have an additional conversation with Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano about any other impacts, but what I would probably suggest, if it appeared that we were going to go with the low interest rate program and a significant number of commercial property owners and residents were going to go that route, then I'd probably ask the town manager to consider preparing a tax anticipation note resolution and official statement, and using it only if we needed to use it. Because again, there's so many unknowns with this program. The last thing we want to do is to be, caught with not enough cash to operate the town. So those are the only concerns that I would have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Mr. Hart, you have anything?
Nothing additional, Mayor.
Okay. I will say, before we vote on this, this is not, we have to choose one or both. So cash flow is going to be an issue no matter what we do. And if cash flow is an issue for a commercial property owner and they can't, if a property owner has a commercial property owner, has significant loss, this is one way where maybe we can work with them to bridge this pain. I will say there's so many unknowns. We don't know. I will say with the state, we're not the only ones that are going to have cash flow problems. A lot of smaller towns than us are going to have more significant cash flow problems. So I would hope that there is a remedy at the state level and the federal level, understanding that municipalities have this issue. We should have all of our tools lined up and ducks in a row in case things don't happen. But we know that that the world has changed and many people's financial lives have fallen off a cliff, and hopefully it's righted and things do get back in not that long order, but we don't know. And this is one way where we can at least say, we're going to work with you the best we can for 3 months. And whatever path you can take that will keep you less damaged in the long run to stay in West Hartford and to be part of our community, then we're going to do it. So that's my own opinion. I think it's a really important, this was a bold move for the governor to do. And we all have to do at least one. And so I think the deferment program has the eligibility component, which is important. The other program has a delinquent component. That's also important. That's encouraging past delinquents to pay up and not forgiving their past delinquent for 18% prior to March 10th. And heading into March 10th, this new world that we're in, or the now world that we're in, understanding that that's going to be too cumbersome, considering the global financial crisis that this world is facing. So those are my thoughts. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments for staff. Anybody? All right. With that, we will do a roll call vote. Louise LeBreau.
Item 6D, Ms. Blanks.
Councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yeah.
Mr. Davidoff.
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Town Councilor Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Counselor Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And we might be the first town adopting both of these. I don't know, but we will find out soon enough. And with that, I will go to 6E, resolution to amend the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget of the Capital Projects Fund by $150,000 for the relocation of utilities in conjunction with the State of Connecticut's Safety and Operational Improvements Project on I-84. I move to adopt. Mr. Hart, would you like to address this?
Yes, Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Mayor. The DOT is currently working on a project to improve I-84 through West Hartford and other towns, including the replacement of a bridge over Berkshire Road. And as part of the project, the DOT is requiring that all of the aerial utilities crossing the bridges, those need to be buried underground. So the town, we do have an aerial traffic signal at that location. Will be required to put it underground. The DOT is going to reimburse us for the construction costs related to the relocation, but we need to spend the money up front and then we will get reimbursed. Corporation Counsel has reviewed and approved the form and legality of the resolution, and we're respectfully requesting your approval.
What? Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions for the town manager? Okay, Ms. Blanks. Town Councilor Carol Blanks.
Town Councilor Carol Blanks. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Town Manager, just a question probably on about logistics, when this project will happen, when, and about how long, and how will traffic be rerouted in that area?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you for the question, Councilor Blanks. I do not have the specifics regarding the rerouting, but the construction is planned to be a very quick project. It should start and finish this spring, so should be complete by June of this year, if you approve it this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Blanks, all set? Are you all set?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hart? Or this? Okay. All right. We will go to roll call. Ms. LeBreau, roll call vote.
Item 6E, Ms. Blanks.
Town Councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Town Councilor Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Thank you all. Okay, now 6F, resolution to appropriate $259,191 of energy rebates in the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget of the Capital Projects Fund. I move to adopt. Mr. Hart? Town Manager Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Councilors, you've seen similar resolutions in the past. Several years ago, we embarked upon some major energy upgrades, and we fund those projects. Let me give you a few examples of what they are. They'll include street lighting, interior and exterior lighting, lighting controls, as well as building control systems. And these are across both town buildings and school district buildings. One of the funding sources we use is rebates from the Connecticut Energy Efficiency Fund program. It's administered by our local utility, Eversource. We have been very successful in applying for and receiving these rebates. Would like to credit Catherine Deviney and Robert Palmer from our staff for the good work they've been doing here. To date, in this fiscal year alone, we've received rebates totaling a little over $259,000. So we're requesting your approval of this resolution so that we can make an appropriation into the Capital Projects Fund and continue this good work. Happy to take any questions that you might have, and Mr. Privatera can assist as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ben, don't fall back. Are there any questions for Mr. Hart on this? I would just like to say that I'm very, very proud of the energy efficiency projects that we have installed, and this is a very fundamental demonstration of what good it is doing. And I'm very appreciative to the work of Catherine Deviney, who is really forward-thinking in the programming that she's done to help us save money and do what's right for our environment. Any other comments or questions? No? All right, roll call, Ms. LeBron.
Item 6F, Ms. Blanks.
Counselor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Town Councilor Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBron. Thank you all again. We just have one more item on the agenda before we adjourn, and it's announcements. There are no announcements of activities, and it's heartbreaking. But what we do have are announcements of some incredibly wonderful, generous generosity, acts of generosity and support. One of the things that I don't know if you can see it behind me, but there's a little heart and lights, and that is a heart for healthcare workers. There are so many brave nurses, as Ben was talking about, the nurses on the front line and doctors that are going to be facing some of the hardest days that they've ever faced and probably have faced since time. So since a terrorist attack. These are our heroes, and we really appreciate all they do. And don't forget it, display a heart. There are programs where you can buy a gift card and donate to a restaurant, or just, do it yourself to a hospital. Whatever you can do, please do for these incredible workers. We know our first responders. We had a long, a discussion about our first responders. Their bravery and their courage and their commitment to our town and to keeping us healthy and safe is of utmost importance. They have to take care of themselves so they can take care of us. But we need PPE. That's that personal protective equipment to protect them. So if you have anything in your home, if you know of anyone that has a source, please let us know so we can get that PPE to our first responders to protect them. And also, I know our healthcare workers need them as well. I also want to say that you will be hearing more from us about the most important thing that you can do to protect your family, your friends, your neighbors, and your community is to stay physically distanced with people that you don't share a home with. And that is the absolutely 100% the most important thing you can do to stop the spread of this insidious virus. So the campaign, a PSA campaign, will go on. It will be students speaking to students to remind them, parents, please help us in this. West Hartford, stay together apart, APART, and the letters are spaced apart. That is going to be our theme. These are some of the most challenging times that many people in our lives have ever faced. Not only is there health risks to so many people, and you don't know who has an underlying health risk. You might have, whether you have, and even people that haven't had underlying health risks have found themselves in life-threatening situations or have passed away from this disease. So don't think that you are safe or can fight it. You don't know. It's a Russian roulette. It's a gamble that no one should be willing to take. And you're putting your if you take a intensive care bed, or a ventilator, you're taking someone else's lifeline too. So please, please act responsibly and take your actions and do what you can. Someone's going to ask you down the road, what did you do when this pandemic hit? Grandma, what did you do? Mom, what did you do? Dad, what did you do? And I hope you can proudly say, I'm talking to the public, I know my elected officials will do it. What did you do when this difficult time struck? Did you protect your grandparents? Did you protect your parents? So please, please, please do that. Did you protect your healthcare workers and your doctors and your first responders? I know that West Hartford has the will and the heart to do what they need to do to repair this community after we pick up the pieces from this. But right now, our biggest mission is to keep our community safe. While I was on this call, I got 4 emails, I think, or texts on people saying people not observing physical distancing 6 feet guidelines. Please don't do that. It's not worth the risk. Don't do it. So, and if you're a runner, do the Corona swerve, or you're walking, do the Corona swerve. This is what we've heard. Go 6 feet around. It's your responsibility to do that. Think of everyone as you have it, and you don't want to infect those people. All right. You're the carrier. This is what you have to do. We're also going to be probably rolling out an education on masks. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow. And for the next few days, guidelines are coming pretty fast and furious. A lot of communities are adopting, recommending people wear masks. And where do we get those masks? A lot of times they're homemade. So and that will be something you will be hearing more about, I hope, in the very near future. There's very little downside as long as you continue to wash your hands and not touch your face. You prevent other people from getting sick, especially in close quarters, grocery stores, pharmacies, at a pickup at a takeout restaurant. So please listen to all those things. I want our community to be as safe and as strong coming through this whole horrible nightmare on the other side. And we're going to be talking a lot about how we put those pieces together in the future. But right now, keep yourself safe, keep your loved ones safe, keep your community safe. And with that, I make a motion to adjourn. Roll call vote, Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks.
Town Councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Mayor Cantor. Mayor Cantor.
Yes, sorry.
Mr. Davidoff.
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Minority Leader Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Town Councilor Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Town Councilor Chris Williams, yes.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you all very much. Thank you for the public. Be healthy, be well.
Good night.